In a small, quiet town nestled in the southern United States, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The streets were lined with old oak trees, their branches stretching wide over sidewalks where neighbors would often stop to chat. Among the landmarks that gave the town its charm was Mama's Diner, a cozy little restaurant tucked into the corner of Main Street. Known for its warm atmosphere, hearty meals, and friendly staff, it was a place where locals gathered to share stories, laughter, and comfort food. But on one seemingly ordinary afternoon, this peaceful haven became the center of an unexpected storm. It was just after lunchtime when Sarah walked into Mama's Diner. She had recently moved to the town for a new job and was still getting used to her surroundings. A young black woman with a bright smile and a determined spirit, Sarah carried herself with confidence despite being new to the area. That day, she decided to take a break from unpacking boxes at her apartment and treat herself to a cup of tea and some quiet time. With her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, she entered the diner, greeted by the familiar clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation. The hostess seated her at a small table near the window, where sunlight streamed through lace curtains. Sarah settled in, ordering a pot of herbal tea and pulling out her laptop. She opened a document filled with notes for an upcoming project, sipping her tea as she worked. For a while, everything seemed normal. The diner buzzed with activity, waitresses weaving between tables, customers laughing over plates of fried chicken and mashed potatoes. No one paid much attention to Sarah, who kept to herself, absorbed in her work. But then, something changed. Mr. Thompson, the owner of the diner, emerged from the kitchen. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s, with graying hair and a stern expression that matched his no-nonsense reputation. Though he ran a successful business, many people in town found him difficult to approach. His views on tradition and how things should be were well known, even if they weren't always popular. As he made his rounds checking on customers, Mr. Thompson's eyes landed on Sarah. At first, he simply stared, his brow furrowing slightly. Then, without warning, he marched over to her table. The sound of his heavy footsteps drew curious glances from nearby diners. When he reached Sarah's table, he didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, he leaned forward, his hands braced on the edge of the table, and said loudly enough for others to hear, "You don't belong here." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Sarah froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. She blinked up at him, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the shock coursing through her. Mr. Thompson straightened, crossing his arms over his chest. "I said you don't belong here," he repeated, his tone firm. "This is a family establishment, and we have standards to uphold." Sarah felt her cheeks flush, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What standards are those?" she asked, her voice rising just enough to carry across the room. "Is it because I'm black?" Mr. Thompson hesitated for a moment, perhaps realizing how inflammatory his words sounded. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I run this place my way," he declared, "and right now, I'm asking you to leave." A hush fell over the diner. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, forks paused halfway to mouths, and all eyes turned toward Sarah's table. Some patrons looked uncomfortable, shifting awkwardly in their seats. Others openly gawked, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Even the waitstaff seemed frozen in place, unsure how to handle the situation. For Sarah, the moment was surreal. Part of her wanted to argue, to demand answers or call him out for his blatant discrimination. But another part of her, the practical, strategic side, knew that staying would only escalate things further. She closed her laptop slowly, her movements deliberate, and slid it back into her bag. Standing up, she looked directly at Mr. Thompson, meeting his gaze with unwavering composure. "I'll go," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But you need to know that what you're doing isn't just wrong. It's going to cost you." With that, she turned and walked toward the door, ignoring the murmurs rippling through the diner. As she stepped outside, the cool breeze brushed against her face, offering a brief moment of relief, but inside anger burned hot. Sarah wasn't someone who backed down easily, and she knew exactly what she needed to do next. Back home, Sarah sat at her desk, her mind racing. She pulled out her phone and opened Instagram, scrolling through her feed as she thought about what to say. Her account, which focused on promoting local businesses and sharing tips for entrepreneurs, had grown significantly over the past year. With over 50,000 followers, her posts regularly reached thousands of people. She realized that this platform could amplify her voice and hold Mr. Thompson accountable. Taking a deep breath, Sarah recorded a short video. In it, she recounted her experience at Mama's Diner, describing how she had been singled out and humiliated simply because of the color of her skin. She spoke calmly but passionately, emphasizing the importance of standing up against racism wherever it occurred. "No one deserves to be treated this way," she concluded. "If you agree, please share this post and let's make sure places like this understand that discrimination has consequences." Within minutes of posting, the video began gaining traction. Followers flooded the comments section with messages of support, tagging friends and urging them to watch. Hashtags like "Charge Justice for Sarah" and "Barsh Stop Racism" started trending, drawing even more attention. People shared screenshots of the diner's social media profiles, flooding them with angry messages and calls for accountability. What had begun as a personal insult quickly transformed into a larger movement, shining a spotlight on systemic racism and the power of collective action. Meanwhile, back at Mama's Diner, the impact was immediate. Employees huddled around phones, watching notifications pour in faster than they could keep up. Calls came in from regular customers canceling reservations, while others vowed never to return. The once bustling restaurant grew eerily quiet, save for the occasional ring of the phone or ding of a notification. It was clear that Mr. Thompson's decision to kick Sarah out had set off a chain reaction, one that would soon shake the very foundation of his business. Though the story was far from over, Sarah's actions proved that courage and conviction could spark monumental change. And as the sun set over the small town, casting long shadows across Main Street, it was impossible to ignore the ripple effects of what had happened that afternoon. The aftermath of Sarah's Instagram post spread like wildfire, igniting conversations far beyond the confines of the small town. What started as a personal account of discrimination quickly grew into something much larger, a movement fueled by outrage, solidarity, and a collective demand for justice. As the video racked up thousands of views, comments, and shares, it became clear that Sarah's experience had struck a nerve with people from all walks of life. Within hours, Mama's Diner was no longer just a local eatery known for its fried chicken and sweet tea. It had become the epicenter of a national debate about racism and accountability. Social media users dissected every detail of the incident, sharing their own stories of discrimination and calling out businesses they felt perpetuated similar biases. Hashtags like "Car Justice for Sarah" and "Troiter Shut Down Racism" dominated Twitter feeds, while memes mocking Mr. Thompson's actions circulated widely. The diner's Facebook page, once filled with glowing reviews and photos of happy customers, was now inundated with angry messages and one-star ratings. Employees at Mama's Diner found themselves caught in the crossfire. Maria, a Latina waitress, who had worked there for 5 years, stood behind the counter scrolling through her phone during a rare lull in service. Her screen lit up with notifications, comments tagging her in posts about the controversy, friends asking if she knew what was happening, and even strangers accusing her of supporting racism simply because she worked there. She sighed deeply, feeling torn between loyalty to her job and disgust at the treatment Sarah had endured. "Did you see this?" asked Jake, another server, sliding his phone across the counter toward Maria. On the screen was a viral tweet showing a screenshot of the diner's Yelp page, where hundreds of new reviews had appeared overnight, all slamming Mr. Thompson for his behavior. "People are losing their minds," Jake muttered, shaking his head. Maria nodded, her fingers trembling as she scrolled further. Among the flood of negative comments were threats directed at the diner, and indirectly at its staff. "They're saying we should lose our jobs too," she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "Like it's somehow our fault." Jake leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I don't think anyone blames us specifically, but this is bad, really bad." He glanced toward the kitchen where Mr. Thompson could be seen pacing anxiously. For the first time since starting at the diner, neither Maria nor Jake felt safe working there. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson was unraveling under the pressure. Used to running his business with an iron fist, he struggled to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. Sitting in his office, he stared blankly at his computer screen, which displayed a steady stream of emails from suppliers, cutting ties with the diner. One email after another announced the suspension of deliveries, everything from fresh produce to coffee beans. Without these essentials, the diner couldn't function. His phone buzzed incessantly on the desk beside him. Each call brought more bad news: canceled catering orders, refunds requested by longtime patrons, and demands for explanations from local reporters. When a journalist from a regional news outlet arrived unannounced, requesting an interview, Mr. Thompson snapped, "Tell them I'm not available." He barked at his assistant before retreating to the storage room to avoid being seen. Despite his attempts to evade responsibility, the public outcry only intensified. Activists began organizing protests outside the diner, drawing attention not just locally but nationally. Flyers appeared around town, urging residents to join a demonstration planned for the following weekend. The flyer featured Sarah's photo alongside bold letters reading, "Stand against racism. Justice for Sarah." Word of the protest reached Sarah herself late that evening. Exhausted but determined, she sat cross-legged on her couch scrolling through updates when her phone buzzed with a message from a friend. Attached was a photo of the flyer. Reading it, Sarah felt a mix of emotions: pride that her story had inspired action, but also sadness that such drastic measures were necessary. She typed out a quick reply. "Thank you for letting me know. I'll be there." As the days passed, the tension in the town reached a boiling point. Neighbors who had lived side by side for years suddenly found themselves divided over the issue. Some defended Mr. Thompson, arguing that he had every right to manage his business however he saw fit. Others condemned his actions, pointing out that refusing service based on race wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Even Mr. Thompson's family began turning against him. His teenage daughter, Emily, confronted him one night after dinner. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with him to apologize. "Dad, you're ruining everything," she cried. "You're losing customers, employees, and now even suppliers won't work with us. Why can't you just say sorry?" Mr. Thompson clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Because I didn't do anything wrong," he snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. Deep down he knew he had made a grave mistake, but admitting it meant swallowing his pride, something he wasn't ready to do. While chaos reigned inside the diner, Sarah continued using her platform to amplify the conversation. She posted daily updates thanking supporters and urging them to keep pushing for change. One particularly powerful post featured a collage of messages from followers sharing their own experiences of discrimination. "This isn't just my story," Sarah wrote. "It's everyone's story. We deserve better." Her words resonated deeply with her audience, many of whom shared the post and added their voices to the growing chorus of dissent. Local activists reached out to collaborate, offering resources and guidance on how to sustain momentum. Together, they planned the upcoming protest, ensuring it would be peaceful, yet impactful. By the end of the week, the diner's fate seemed sealed. Employees quit in droves, unable to stomach the backlash or risk association with a business mired in controversy. Regulars stopped coming, opting instead for competitors who publicly condemned Mr. Thompson's actions. Even loyal customers who had frequented the diner for decades began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with racism. Yet amid the turmoil, seeds of hope began to sprout. Conversations about race and equality took center stage, forcing the community to confront uncomfortable truths. Schools hosted discussions about diversity and inclusion, while churches organized prayer vigils for healing and unity. Though progress was slow and uneven, it was undeniable that something fundamental had shifted. For Sarah, the whirlwind of events reinforced her belief in the power of storytelling and collective action. She realized that her decision to speak out hadn't just exposed one man's prejudice, it had sparked a broader reckoning. challenging the status quo and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. And though the road ahead promised challenges, she remained steadfast in her resolve to fight for a world where everyone, regardless of skin color, could feel welcome anywhere. As the sun set on the tumultuous week, casting golden hues over the quiet streets of the town, the diner stood eerily empty, a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred and exclusion. But beyond its walls, a movement was gaining strength, driven by courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to change. The weekend arrived, and with it came the protest outside Mama's diner. What had started as a small idea sparked by Sarah's courage quickly grew into a powerful demonstration of unity and resilience. The streets surrounding the diner buzzed with energy as people from all over the town and even neighboring cities gathered to show their support. Signs bearing messages like "Racism has no place here," "Justice for Sarah," and "Equality for all" dotted the crowd, held high by individuals of every age, race, and background. Sarah stood at the edge of the gathering, her heart pounding as she took in the scene. She hadn't expected this level of turnout. Hundreds of people filled the sidewalks, spilling onto the road despite police barricades set up to manage the flow. Some carried banners, others chanted slogans in unison. Children clutched balloons, painted with rainbows, while elderly residents sat on folding chairs holding hands and singing old civil rights hymns. It was a tapestry of humanity united under one cause, standing against racism. As she walked through the crowd, strangers approached her, offering hugs, words of encouragement and gratitude. "Thank you for speaking up," said an older white woman, tears glistening in her eyes. "We've been waiting too long for someone to shine a light on these issues." A young black man handed her a poster he'd made himself, featuring a bold illustration of Sarah alongside the words, "Courage changes everything." Though humbled by the outpouring of support, Sarah couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating lasting change. As the organizer of the event stepped forward to address the crowd, Sarah moved closer to listen. "Friends, neighbors, allies," the organizer began, his voice amplified by a portable microphone. "Today we stand together not only to demand justice for Sarah, but to send a clear message to anyone who thinks discrimination is acceptable. Enough is enough." Cheers erupted, echoing off the buildings lining Main Street. The organizer went on to outline specific actions the community could take, from supporting minority-owned businesses to holding local leaders accountable for fostering inclusivity. Inside the diner, Mr. Thompson watched the scene unfold through the blinds of his office window. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the desk. Never in his life had he imagined things would escalate to this point. He had always prided himself on running a successful business, but now that same business was crumbling before his eyes. The once bustling restaurant was eerily silent, save for the occasional murmur from the few remaining employees huddled near the cash register. Maria, the Latina waitress, glanced nervously at Mr. Thompson. She had stayed on longer than most of her co-workers, partly out of necessity. She needed the income to support her family, but also because she felt conflicted. On one hand, she resented being dragged into this mess. On the other, she couldn't ignore the injustice of what had happened to Sarah. When Mr. Thompson finally emerged from his office, Maria mustered the courage to speak up. "Mr. Thompson," she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think if you apologize, people might calm down?" He shot her a sharp look, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Apologize for what? Running my business the way I see fit?" "But sir," Maria persisted, her voice gaining strength despite her nerves. "People are saying you discriminated against Sarah because of her race. That's why they're protesting. If you just said you were sorry—" "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do wrong," he interrupted gruffly, cutting her off. "This is ridiculous." Frustrated and disheartened, Maria turned away. She knew better than to argue further, but deep down she wondered how long she could keep working for someone so stubbornly blind to the harm he was causing. Outside, the protest continued to gain momentum. Local activists took turns addressing the crowd, sharing stories of their own experiences with racism and urging everyone present to remain vigilant. One speaker, a middle-aged black man named Marcus, recounted how he had been refused service at a gas station years ago simply because of the color of his skin. "These kinds of things happen every day," he said, his voice steady yet passionate. "But today, we're saying no more. Today we're standing together to make sure no one else has to go through what Sarah, or any of us, has faced." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers mingling with chants of, "No justice, no peace." Nearby, reporters from regional news outlets captured footage of the event, interviewing participants and broadcasting live updates. By mid-afternoon, images and videos of the protest had gone viral, drawing attention from national media outlets. Journalists descended upon the small town, eager to cover the story of a diner owner whose refusal to serve a black woman had ignited a nationwide conversation about racism. Back inside the diner, the pressure mounted. Employees who had stuck around until now began packing up their belongings, realizing there was little hope left for the business. Jake, the server who had confided in Maria earlier, shook his head as he tied up his apron for the last time. "I can't stay here anymore," he admitted. "It's not worth it." One by one, the remaining staff members followed suit, leaving Mr. Thompson alone in the empty dining room. Desperation clawed at him as he wandered between tables, staring at the vacant chairs and untouched menus. He tried calling suppliers, again hoping to convince them to resume deliveries, but each call ended the same way, with rejection. Even loyal customers who had frequented the diner for decades sent emails or voicemails explaining they couldn't return until the situation improved. That evening, as the protest wound down and the crowd dispersed, Sarah lingered behind to help clean up. Volunteers gathered trash, dismantled signs, and folded chairs, chatting animatedly about what they planned to do next. Many expressed interest in organizing similar events in other towns, spreading awareness, and continuing the fight for equality. For Sarah, seeing such determination gave her hope, even though the battle was far from over. Later that night, as she lay in bed replaying the day's events in her mind, Sarah received a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, she read, "You've inspired me to speak out against racism where I live. Thank you for your bravery." Smiling faintly, she set her phone aside and closed her eyes. Exhaustion washed over her, but so did a sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she also knew she wasn't walking it alone. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson sat alone in his darkened office, staring blankly at the wall. The weight of his decisions, and their consequences, pressed heavily on him. For the first time, doubt crept into his mind. Had he truly done the right thing? Could he have handled the situation differently? These questions haunted him as he switched off the lights and locked up the diner for the night. As the town drifted off to sleep, the divide between those fighting for justice and those clinging to outdated beliefs remained stark. Yet amid the tension, glimmers of progress shone brightly. Conversations sparked by the protest continued late into the night, both online and offline. Neighbors who had never spoken openly about race found themselves discussing privilege, bias, and systemic inequality. Schools announced plans to incorporate diversity training into their curriculums, while local businesses pledged to adopt anti-discrimination policies. For Sarah, the protest marked the beginning of a larger journey, one that would require patience, persistence, and unwavering resolve. But as she drifted off to sleep, she reminded herself of the faces she had seen that day. The young and the old, the black and the white, the rich and the poor, all united in their quest for a fairer, kinder world. And though challenges lay ahead, she believed deep in her heart that change was possible. The days following the protest brought a wave of consequences that rippled through every corner of the town, and none felt it more acutely than Mr. Thompson. Once a proud and stubborn figurehead of Mama's Diner, he now found himself isolated, both personally and professionally. The diner, once bustling with customers, sat eerily empty, its neon open sign flickering like a ghostly reminder of better days. Inside, dust began to settle on the countertops, and the smell of stale coffee lingered in the air. Employees, who had stayed loyal until the bitter end, had finally walked out, leaving Mr. Thompson to face the wreckage alone. Financial ruin loomed large. Suppliers refused to deliver fresh ingredients, forcing him to rely on dwindling stockpiles that quickly spoiled. Utility bills piled up and rent payments fell behind schedule. Even the bank, which had extended loans to help expand the diner years ago, reconsidered their partnership. A representative from the local branch called one morning, explaining that continued association with such controversy posed too great a risk to their reputation. "We're sorry, Mr. Thompson," the banker said curtly over the phone, "but we need you to resolve this issue before we can proceed." Desperate to salvage what little remained of his business, Mr. Thompson tried everything he could think of to win back customers. He posted flyers around town advertising deep discounts, buy one meal, get one free, and even hosted a poorly attended community appreciation day. But no amount of gimmicks or promotions could erase the stain of racism that clung to his name. People simply didn't trust him anymore, and word of mouth, a diner's lifeblood, had turned toxic. At home, the stress ate away at him. His wife, Margaret, watched helplessly as her husband transformed into a shadow of his former self. Gone was the confident man who used to boast about his success. In his place stood someone hollowed out by guilt, fear, and regret. Their teenage daughter Emily avoided him altogether, retreating to her room whenever he entered. One evening, after another tense dinner where silence hung heavy between them, Margaret confronted him. "You have to fix this, John," she said firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're losing everything, not just the diner, but your family too. Is this really worth it?" Mr. Thompson clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "I didn't do anything wrong," he muttered under his breath, though his tone lacked conviction. Deep down, he knew she was right. Pride had kept him from apologizing earlier, but now it seemed like pride might cost him everything. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to channel the momentum of the protest into meaningful action. She partnered with local activists, community leaders, and educators to create workshops aimed at fostering dialogue about race and equality. These sessions, held in libraries, schools, and churches across the town, attracted diverse crowds eager to learn and grow. Attendees shared personal stories, asked tough questions, and brainstormed ways to combat systemic racism within their own spheres of influence. One particularly impactful workshop focused on bystander intervention, how ordinary people could step in when witnessing acts of discrimination. Participants practiced scenarios, role-playing responses to situations like the one Sarah had faced at the diner. Many left feeling empowered, armed with tools to make a difference in their daily lives. Sarah also collaborated with minority-owned businesses to promote economic empowerment. Together, they launched a campaign encouraging residents to redirect their spending toward establishments owned by people of color. Flyers and social media posts highlighted local Black, Latino, and Asian entrepreneurs showcasing their products and services. This initiative not only helped struggling businesses thrive, but also sent a powerful message. Inclusivity wasn't just a moral imperative, it was good for the economy too. As the weeks passed, the divide within the town became increasingly apparent. While many embraced the push for change, others dug in their heels, doubling down on outdated beliefs. Some defended Mr. Thompson, arguing that his actions were justified because he was the owner of a private business. "He has the right to choose who comes into his establishment," one resident declared during a heated town hall meeting. Others dismissed the protests as overblown, claiming that racism wasn't a real problem in their community, but these arguments rang hollow to those who had experienced discrimination firsthand. At the same town hall, Marcus, the activist who had spoken at the protest, rose to address the crowd. "Racism doesn't always come in the form of slurs or violence," he said, his voice steady yet impassioned. "Sometimes it's subtle. It's exclusion. It's treating someone differently because of the color of their skin. And yes, it happens here, We can pretend it doesn't exist, but ignoring it won't make it go away. His words struck a chord with many attendees, sparking emotional debates that spilled into the streets long after the meeting ended. For some, it was an uncomfortable awakening, a realization that prejudice wasn't confined to distant cities or history books. For others, it reinforced their commitment to fighting injustice wherever it reared its head. Amidst the turmoil, small victories began to emerge. Local schools introduced diversity training programs for teachers and staff, emphasizing the importance of creating inclusive environments for students. Churches organized interfaith dialogues, bringing together congregations from different backgrounds to pray and reflect on unity. Even the town council passed a resolution condemning discrimination, pledging to prioritize equity in all future policies. But perhaps the most significant shift occurred within individual hearts and minds. Conversations that had once been taboo became commonplace, with neighbors sitting down to discuss privilege, bias, and accountability. Parents taught their children about empathy and respect, planting seeds of understanding that would grow over time. Slowly but surely, the fabric of the community began to change. For Mr. Thompson, the turning point came unexpectedly. One rainy afternoon, as he sat alone in the diner flipping through old photo albums, Emily walked in. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. She hesitated near the doorway before speaking. "Dad, I don't recognize you anymore," she said softly, her voice breaking. "This isn't who you are, or at least it's not who I thought you were." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized the depth of the pain he had caused, not just to strangers like Sarah, but to his own family. That night, unable to sleep, he sat down at his desk and drafted a letter. It wasn't easy. Every sentence felt like pulling teeth. But by sunrise, he had written something raw, honest, and deeply vulnerable. The next morning, he posted the letter online, sharing it alongside a video apology. In it, he admitted his mistakes, acknowledging the harm he had caused and promising to attend diversity training. He vowed to implement new policies ensuring equal treatment for all customers, regardless of race. "I let my pride blind me," he confessed, his voice shaking, "and for that I am truly sorry." Reactions to his apology were mixed. Some dismissed it as insincere, accusing him of acting out of desperation rather than genuine remorse. Others saw it as a step in the right direction, applauding his willingness to take responsibility. Sarah watched the video quietly, her emotions swirling. When asked for comment, she responded with grace. "Apologies are important," she said, "but actions matter more. Let's see how he follows through." Though the road ahead promised challenges, the town had taken a crucial step forward. The protest had forced uncomfortable conversations, exposed hidden biases, and inspired collective action. For Sarah, it was proof that courage and resilience could spark monumental change. As she stood outside Mama's diner one crisp autumn morning, watching workers repaint the faded sign above the door, she allowed herself a moment of hope. The scars of racism wouldn't heal overnight, but with persistence and unity, progress was possible. The weeks that followed Mr. Thompson's public apology brought a mix of skepticism and cautious optimism to the town. While some dismissed his words as too little, too late, others saw it as an opportunity for redemption, not just for him, but for the entire community. For Sarah, the apology was a bittersweet moment. On one hand, she appreciated the acknowledgement of wrongdoing. On the other, she knew apologies alone wouldn't erase the damage done. Change required action, consistency, and accountability, and she intended to hold Mr. Thompson to his promises. Mr. Thompson himself was a changed man, or at least he was trying to be. After posting his apology video, he enrolled in a diversity training program recommended by local activists. The sessions were uncomfortable at first, forcing him to confront biases he hadn't realized he harbored. He learned about systemic racism, microaggressions, and the importance of creating inclusive spaces. At times, he felt defensive, especially when trainers pointed out how his actions reflected broader societal issues. But slowly something began to shift inside him. He started seeing the world through a different lens, one where privilege wasn't invisible but glaringly obvious. Back at Mama's Diner, renovations were underway. The interior had been stripped bare, its worn-out booths replaced with sleek new seating, and the walls repainted in warm, inviting colors. A fresh sign hung above the entrance, reading, "Welcome all," in bold letters. It was part of Mr. Thompson's effort to rebuild trust, not just with customers, but with employees too. He reached out to former staff members, offering them their jobs back along with raises and better working conditions. Many hesitated, unsure if they could trust him again, but a few agreed to return, willing to give him another chance. One such employee was Maria, the Latina waitress who had struggled so deeply during the controversy. When Mr. Thompson approached her personally, apologizing for putting her in an impossible position, she decided to come back. "I'm not doing this for you," she told him bluntly. "I'm doing it because I believe people deserve second chances, but don't mess this up." Her honesty stung, but he respected her candor. From then on, he made a conscious effort to listen, to truly hear what his employees and customers needed. As the diner prepared to reopen under new management principles, Sarah remained actively involved in shaping its future. She collaborated with Mr. Thompson to draft policies ensuring equal treatment for all patrons, regardless of race, gender, or background. These included mandatory bias training for staff, clear protocols for handling complaints, and regular check-ins with community leaders to ensure accountability. Together, they also designed a mural for the diner's exterior, featuring vibrant images of diverse faces alongside the words, "Unity starts here." News of the diner's transformation spread quickly, drawing attention from both locals and outsiders. Reporters returned to cover the story, this time focusing on redemption and resilience. One journalist wrote a feature titled, "From Division to Dialogue: How a Small Town Learned to Heal," highlighting how Sarah's courage had sparked meaningful change. The article praised her leadership and noted how her actions had inspired similar movements in neighboring towns. It wasn't long before invitations poured in for Sarah to speak at conferences, schools, and community events across the country. Despite the growing recognition, Sarah stayed grounded. She continued using her platform to advocate for justice, emphasizing that her fight wasn't just about one diner. It was about dismantling systemic racism wherever it existed. She partnered with national organizations focused on racial equity, lending her voice to campaigns aimed at educating businesses, schools, and governments about inclusivity. Her social media following skyrocketed, reaching over 200,000 followers who eagerly awaited her posts. Yet amidst the accolades, she never forgot why she had started this journey in the first place: to create a world where everyone felt welcome. Meanwhile, tensions within the town persisted, though they took on a quieter form. Some residents still grumbled about the changes, accusing Mr. Thompson of caving to political correctness. Others expressed frustration that the focus on racism overshadowed other pressing issues, like poverty or healthcare access. Conversations around dinner tables and coffee shops often veered into debates with opinions clashing fiercely. But even among dissenters, there were signs of progress. One evening, during a heated discussion at the local library, an elderly white man stood up and admitted, "I didn't think racism was a problem here until this whole thing happened. Now I see things differently." His admission stunned the room, prompting others to share their own reflections. Slowly, the conversation shifted from defensiveness to curiosity, a willingness to learn and grow. Schools played a pivotal role in fostering this shift. Teachers incorporated lessons about civil rights history and modern-day activism into their curriculums, encouraging students to think critically about equality. Art projects celebrating diversity decorated hallways, while student-led clubs organized fundraisers for marginalized communities. Even sports teams adopted slogans like "Respect Everyone" on their jerseys, sending a powerful message of unity. Churches, too, became hubs of healing. Interfaith services brought together congregations from various backgrounds, fostering connections that transcended religious differences. Sermons emphasized love, forgiveness, and the shared humanity of all people. One pastor famously said during a Sunday service, "We are not defined by our mistakes, but by how we choose to rise above them." For Mr. Thompson, rebuilding trust proved to be a long and arduous process. Though the diner reopened to modest crowds, many longtime patrons avoided returning, unable to reconcile their loyalty to the old establishment with the new vision. Still, he refused to give up. He spent hours each day greeting customers, asking for feedback, and addressing concerns directly. Slowly, word began to spread that Mama's Diner wasn't the same place it used to be, and for some, that was enough to give it another try. Employees noticed the difference too. Jake, the server who had quit during the height of the controversy, eventually returned after hearing about the changes. "It feels lighter here now," he remarked one afternoon, glancing around the bustling dining room. "Like we're actually building something good." Maria nodded in agreement, though she remained vigilant. "Let's hope it stays this way," she said firmly, "because if it doesn't, we'll lose more than business. We'll lose respect." As months passed, the town began to heal in ways no one had anticipated. Businesses implemented anti-discrimination policies modeled after those at Mama's Diner. Community gardens sprouted up in vacant lots, tended by volunteers from all walks of life. Local artists painted murals celebrating diversity, transforming drab walls into colorful testaments to unity. Even the annual Fall Festival featured performances and workshops highlighting cultural traditions from around the world. For Sarah, watching these changes unfold filled her with pride, but also reminded her of the work still ahead. Racism was deeply rooted, and while progress had been made, it wasn't permanent. Complacency could undo everything they had fought for. So she kept pushing, kept speaking, kept inspiring others to join the cause. One crisp winter morning, Sarah stood outside Mama's Diner once again. This time, however, the scene was vastly different. Families laughed over pancakes, friends chatted over steaming cups of coffee, and strangers exchanged smiles as they waited in line. Above them, the Welcome All sign gleamed brightly in the sunlight, a symbol of hope and resilience. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She knew the road to true equality was far from over, but she also knew that every step mattered. And as she walked away, ready to tackle the next challenge, she carried with her the knowledge that courage, compassion, and collective action could move mountains, even in the unlikeliest of places. Months had passed since the incident at Mama's Diner, and the town was beginning to feel like a different place. The scars of division still lingered, but they were slowly being replaced by bonds of understanding and shared purpose. Sarah, who had once been an outsider in this close-knit community, now found herself at the heart of its transformation. Her courage had not only shut down a racist establishment, it had sparked a movement that reached far beyond the borders of the Teof small town. Mama's Diner became a symbol of redemption. Under new policies and leadership, it thrived as a space where everyone felt welcome. Customers from all walks of life filled its booths, sharing meals and stories. Families celebrated birthdays there, couples held hands over milkshakes, and strangers struck up conversations at neighboring tables. The diner wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a testament to what could happen when people chose empathy over prejudice. Mr. Thompson, though humbled by his fall from grace, worked tirelessly to prove he had changed. He attended every diversity training session, read books on racial equity, and sought advice from community leaders. His efforts weren't always perfect. He stumbled occasionally, saying or doing something that revealed lingering biases, but he never stopped trying. Employees like Maria and Jake noticed the difference. "He listens now," Maria said during a staff meeting. "It's not about him anymore. It's about us. All of us." The diner also became a hub for activism. Walls once adorned with generic sao decor now featured posters promoting local minority-owned businesses and upcoming community events. A bulletin board near the entrance displayed resources for fighting discrimination, alongside flyers for workshops on topics like allyship and cultural competency. Every Friday evening, the diner hosted Unity Nights, where residents gathered to discuss social issues, share ideas, and plan initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity. Sarah continued to play a key role in these efforts, though her focus expanded beyond the diner. She traveled to other towns and cities, speaking at conferences, schools, and corporate events about the power of storytelling and collective action. Her talks inspired countless individuals to stand up against racism in their own communities. "Change starts with one voice," she often said, "but it grows stronger when we join together." Her advocacy earned her national recognition. Magazines profiled her as a changemaker. Television shows invited her to share her story, and universities awarded her honorary degrees. Yet despite the accolades, Sarah remained grounded. She turned down lucrative sponsorship deals and refused to monetize her platform, insisting that her mission was about justice, not profit. "This isn't about me," she told reporters repeatedly. "It's about creating a world where no one has to experience what I did." Back in the town, the ripple effects of Sarah's actions continued to reshape lives. Schools adopted anti-bias curriculums, teaching students to recognize and challenge stereotypes. Churches organized service projects focused on marginalized groups, while businesses pledged to hire more diverse workforces. Even the local government took steps toward progress, passing ordinances to protect against discrimination and funding programs aimed at economic empowerment for underrepresented communities. Not everyone embraced the changes enthusiastically. Some residents clung to old beliefs, grumbling about political correctness or claiming the town was losing its identity. But even among skeptics, cracks began to form in their resistance. Conversations that had once been taboo, about privilege, bias, and systemic inequality, became commonplace. Neighbors who had avoided discussing race openly now sat down together, listening to each other's perspectives and finding common ground. One such neighbor was Mrs. Peterson, a retired schoolteacher who had initially defended Mr. Thompson's right to refuse service. Over time, however, she began attending unity nights at the diner, drawn by curiosity and a desire to understand. During one discussion, she tearfully admitted, "I thought I understood racism because I grew up in a different era, but I realize now how blind I've been." Her honesty resonated with others, encouraging them to confront their own biases. For Mr. Thompson, the journey of redemption was ongoing. Though many forgave him, some never fully trusted him again, and he accepted that. What mattered most was knowing he had done everything possible to make amends. When Emily graduated high school that spring, she delivered a speech thanking her father for changing, not just for her sake, but for the sake of future generations. "You taught me that. It's okay to admit when you're wrong," she said, her voice steady, "and that real strength comes from learning and growing." As summer approached, the town prepared to celebrate its annual festival, a tradition that had taken on new meaning in recent years. This year's theme was Unity Through Diversity, reflecting the strides made toward inclusivity. Booths showcased food, art, and music from various cultures, while performances highlighted the talents of local artists from marginalized backgrounds. At the center of it all stood Mama's Diner, transformed into a vibrant gathering spot where volunteers handed out free meals and information about community resources. On the final day of the festival, Sarah addressed the crowd from a makeshift stage. Thousands of people packed the square, their faces glowing in the golden light of the setting sun. She spoke about the challenges they had faced and the victories they had achieved, urging everyone to remain vigilant in the fight for equality. "We've come so far," she said, her voice ringing clear. "But our work is far from over. Let's keep pushing forward together." Her words ignited cheers and applause, echoing through the streets long after she stepped off the stage. As fireworks lit up the night sky, painting streaks of color across the horizon, the town felt alive with hope. For the first time in years, the future seemed bright, not because problems had disappeared, but because people were committed to solving them. In the months that followed, Sarah returned to her career in marketing, using her expertise to amplify voices often overlooked in mainstream media. She launched a podcast called Courageous Conversations, featuring interviews with activists, educators, and everyday heroes working to create change. Listeners tuned in from around the world, sharing their own stories and joining the movement she had started. Meanwhile, Mama's Diner flourished as a beacon of inclusivity. Its success inspired similar transformations in other businesses, proving that accountability and compassion could coexist with profitability. Mr. Thompson eventually stepped aside, handing over management to a team of employees passionate about continuing the diner's legacy of unity. Though the road ahead promised challenges, the town faced them with resilience and determination. Conversations about race and equality became part of daily life, woven into the fabric of the community. Children grew up learning to celebrate differences rather than fear them, and adults modeled behaviors rooted in kindness and respect. For Sarah, the journey had been both exhausting and exhilarating. She had walked into Mama's Diner as a stranger seeking solace and walked out as a catalyst for monumental change. Along the way, she had discovered the true power of courage, not just to confront injustice, but to inspire others to do the same. As she drove away from the town one crisp autumn morning, heading toward her next adventure, Sarah glanced back at the diner one last time. Above its doors, the Welcome All sign gleamed brightly in the sunlight, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. And though her chapter in the town's story had ended, she knew the impact of her actions would endure for generations to come. The road to equality was long, uneven, and fraught with obstacles. But thanks to Sarah, and countless others like her, it was also paved with hope, courage, and the unwavering belief that a better world was possible.